My name is Maria, and I'm a housekeeper. For the past 8 years, I've worked for the Harrington family and their massive estate on the hill. Richard Harrington is a successful businessman. His wife, Caroline, is a socialite, and they have 2 teenage kids. To most people, they look like the perfect American family. But when you clean someone's house every day, you see things, you hear things, and sometimes you witness things that change everything you thought you knew about people. If you've ever worked in someone's home and discovered secrets that could destroy their perfect image, hit that subscribe button and tell me where you're watching from. I read every comment because I know what it's like to carry someone else's secrets while they treat you like you're invisible. It all started 3 months ago on a Tuesday evening. I usually finish work by 6 p.m., but Mrs. Caroline had asked me to stay late to help prepare for a dinner party they were hosting the following weekend. I was in the kitchen organizing the china when Mr. Richard came downstairs with his briefcase and suit jacket. "Maria, I'll be working very late tonight at the office," he announced, adjusting his tie in the hallway mirror. "Probably won't be back until after midnight. Big presentation tomorrow." Mrs. Caroline appeared from the living room, looking elegant as always in her silk blouse and pearls. "Again? Richard, this is the third time this week. The children barely see you anymore." "I know, sweetheart, but this Henderson account is crucial for the firm. Once we close this deal, things will slow down, I promise." He kissed her cheek and headed toward the garage. I watched from the kitchen window as his black BMW pulled out of the circular driveway and disappeared down the tree-lined street. Mrs. Caroline sighed and turned to me. "Maria, would you mind staying until 8 tonight? I want to reorganize the guest room closets before the weekend." "Of course, Mrs. Caroline, no problem." What she didn't know was that I had a very good reason for wanting to stay late that night. You see, over the past few weeks, I'd been noticing some strange things. Items moved in Mr. Richard's study when I was certain I'd left them in specific places. His computer was sometimes still warm in the mornings when I arrived, even though he claimed to leave for work at 7 a.m. sharp. And there were phone calls he would take in hushed tones, walking quickly to his study and closing the door. But the strangest thing was the laundry. I've been doing their washing for 8 years. I know every piece of clothing in that house. Recently, I'd been finding shirts that smelled like unfamiliar perfume. Not Mrs. Caroline's signature Chanel scent, but something floral and sweet. And there were receipts in his pockets for restaurants I knew he'd never taken his wife to, because she always complained about wanting to try new places. I finished the guest room work by 8 p.m., but instead of leaving, I told Mrs. Caroline I wanted to get a head start on the morning cleaning. She thanked me and went upstairs to help the kids with their homework. By 9 p.m., the house was quiet. The children were in their rooms, and Mrs. Caroline was in the master bedroom reading. That's when I decided to do something I'd never done before. I stayed hidden. I turned off most of the downstairs lights and settled into the small sitting room off the kitchen, where I sometimes took my lunch breaks. From there, I had a clear view of the main hallway and the front entrance. I wasn't sure what I was expecting to see, but something deep in my gut told me that Mr. Richard's late-night work story wasn't the whole truth. Hours passed. I dozed off in the chair around 10:30, but I woke up when I heard a car engine in the driveway. I checked my phone. It was 11:45 p.m., right on schedule with what he'd told his wife. I peeked through the window and saw Mr. Richard's BMW pulling into the garage. But something was odd. Instead of coming straight into the house like he normally did, he sat in the car for several minutes. The interior light was on, and I could see him checking his phone, then looking at himself in the rearview mirror, adjusting his hair. When he finally came inside, I noticed that he was carrying his suit jacket instead of wearing it. His tie was loosened, and there was something different about his appearance. He looked satisfied, almost happy in a way I rarely saw when he came home from actual work. He headed straight upstairs, and I heard the master bedroom door open quietly. "How was the presentation, honey?" Mrs. Caroline's sleepy voice drifted down the hallway. "Very well. Henderson was impressed. I think we'll close the deal by Friday." They spoke in low tones for a few more minutes before the house went completely silent. I waited another 30 minutes before carefully making my way to the front door and leaving. But as I walked to my car, parked at the end of the long driveway, something made me turn back toward the house. That's when I saw it. Mr. Richard was standing at his study window on the first floor, still fully dressed, talking on his phone. The blue glow from his computer screen was visible behind him. If he had just come home from a long day of work and gone to bed with his wife, why was he back downstairs on the phone at 12:30 in the morning? I sat in my car for 20 more minutes, watching. He paced back and forth in that study, gesturing with his free hand like he was having an animated conversation. At one point, he laughed, not the tired chuckle of someone wrapping up business calls, but the genuine, warm laugh of someone talking to someone they cared about. That night, I drove home with more questions than answers, but I made a decision that would change everything for the Harrington family. I was going to find out what Mr. Richard was really doing during his late-night work sessions. The next morning, I arrived at 7 a.m. as usual. Mr. Richard was already gone, supposedly to his early morning meetings. Mrs. Caroline was in the kitchen making coffee, looking tired. "Good morning, Maria. Richard left very early today, said he wanted to get to the office before the Henderson people arrived." "Of course, Mrs. Caroline. Should I clean his study today?" "Yes, please. He's been working so hard lately, that room is probably a mess." I waited until she left for her yoga class before entering Mr. Richard's study. The room smelled faintly of that same floral perfume I'd been noticing on his shirts. His computer was password protected, but I noticed something interesting. Next to his keyboard was a small notepad where he jotted down reminders. Usually it had things like "call Johnson about contract" or "meeting with partners at 3 p.m." But today, there was something different. In his handwriting, I saw an address I didn't recognize, followed by 8 p.m., bring wine. I memorized the address and continued cleaning. In his trash bin, I found something that made my heart race. A receipt from an expensive lingerie store dated yesterday for $237. Mrs. Caroline was a conservative dresser who bought her undergarments from department stores, not boutique lingerie shops. But the most damning evidence was in his suit jacket hanging in the closet. In the inside pocket, I found a hotel keycard. Not just any hotel, but the Grand View Resort, the most romantic and expensive hotel in our city. The kind of place you take someone when you want to make a very special impression. The keycard was dated for that evening. I stared at that piece of plastic, my hands shaking. Mr. Richard had lied to his wife about working late. He was having an affair. And from the evidence I was finding, it was serious enough that he was spending significant money on expensive gifts and luxury hotel rooms. Mrs. Caroline was one of the kindest employers I've ever had. She always treated me with respect, paid me fairly, and even gave me bonuses during the holidays. She didn't deserve this betrayal, but she also didn't know that her housekeeper was uncovering her husband's double life one piece of evidence at a time. I spent the rest of the morning cleaning and thinking. By the time Mrs. Caroline returned from yoga, I had made another decision. That evening, I was going to follow Mr. Richard. "Mrs. Caroline," I said when she came into the kitchen, "would it be all right if I worked late again tonight? I want to deep clean the dining room before your dinner party this weekend." "Of course, Maria. You're so thoughtful. Richard will be working late again anyway, so I'll probably just have a quiet evening with the kids." Another lie. He wouldn't be working late. He'd be at the Grandview Resort with whoever had been receiving those expensive gifts. At 6 p.m., I watched from the kitchen window as Mr. Richard lowered his briefcase into his BMW. But this time, I also saw him put a small shopping bag in the back seat. The bag from the lingerie store, I was certain. "Working late again, honey," he called to Mrs. Caroline as he headed toward the garage. "Don't wait up." "Drive safely," she replied, from the living room, not even looking up from helping their daughter with her homework. As soon as his car disappeared down the street, I told Mrs. Caroline I was stepping out to grab some supplies for the cleaning and would be back in an hour. Instead, I got in my car and drove toward the address I'd memorized from his notepad. The address led me to an upscale apartment complex about 15 minutes from the Harrington estate. I parked across the street and waited. At 7:50 p.m., Mr. Richard's BMW pulled into the visitor parking area. My heart was pounding as I watched him get out of his car. He was carrying the shopping bag and a bottle of wine. He looked around nervously before walking toward one of the apartment buildings. But what happened next shocked me more than I could have prepared for. The apartment door opened and Mr. Richard was greeted by someone that made my jaw drop. It wasn't some young secretary or business associate. It was Mrs. Patterson, Caroline's best friend. Jennifer Patterson had been coming to the Harrington house for years. She was Caroline's closest confidant, the person Caroline called when she needed advice, the friend she trusted with her deepest secrets. They had lunch together twice a week. They went shopping together. They planned their children's birthday parties together. And she had been sleeping with Caroline's husband. I watched in disbelief as Jennifer wrapped her arms around Mr. Richard and kissed him passionately right there in the doorway. She was wearing a silk robe, and her hair was styled in a way that suggested she'd been preparing for his arrival. They disappeared into the apartment, and I sat in my car, stunned. This wasn't just an affair. This was a betrayal by the two people Caroline trusted most in the world. Her husband and her best friend had been carrying on behind her back, and she had absolutely no idea. I stayed parked across the street for 2 hours, my mind racing. How long had this been going on? Did other people know? Were Caroline's children aware that their father was cheating with their mother's best friend? At 10 p.m., I saw movement in the apartment. The lights went out in what I assumed was the bedroom, and softer lighting came on in what looked like the living room. I could see silhouettes moving around, and it was clear they were settling in for the evening. Mr. Richard wouldn't be home until after midnight, just like he'd told Caroline. But he wouldn't be coming from his office. He'd be coming from Jennifer Patterson's bed. I drove home that night knowing that I held information that could destroy not just the Harrington marriage, but an entire social circle. Caroline's world was built on her friendships with other wealthy wives, her trust in her husband, and her belief in the stability of her family. But I also knew that she deserved to know the truth. The question was, what was I going to do about it? The next morning arrived like any other, but I felt like I was carrying a bomb in my chest. I arrived at the Harrington house at 7 a.m., just as Mr. Richard was leaving for work. He looked refreshed, almost glowing, like a man who'd had a very good night. "Good morning, Maria," he said cheerfully, adjusting his tie. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" "Good morning, Mr. Richard," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. What I wanted to say was, "I know where you were last night, and it wasn't the office." Instead, I watched him drive away in his BMW, probably heading to his actual job, where he'd spend the day pretending to be a faithful husband and devoted father. Mrs. Caroline was in the kitchen when I came inside, looking tired again. This was becoming a pattern. The more her husband stayed out late, the more exhausted she seemed. "Maria, I'm having lunch with Jennifer today. She's been such a good friend lately, always calling to check on me when Richard's working these long hours." My stomach turned. Jennifer Patterson was calling to check on Caroline while sleeping with her husband. The level of deception was staggering. "That sounds nice, Mrs. Caroline. Will you be eating here or going out?" "We're meeting at that new bistro downtown. Jennifer said she has some exciting news to share." I wondered what kind of exciting news a woman shares with her best friend while secretly destroying her marriage. Maybe she was going to talk about the expensive lingerie Richard had bought for her. Maybe she'd mentioned the romantic hotel visits. Or maybe she was cruel enough to talk about their affair right to Caroline's face, knowing she'd never suspect the truth. After Mrs. Caroline left for her lunch, I found myself alone in the house with my thoughts and my anger. I'd been cleaning this family's home for 8 years. I'd watched their children grow up. I'd been here for birthday parties, holidays, anniversaries. I'd seen Caroline cry when her mother died and celebrated when Richard's business had its most successful year. These people weren't just my employers. They were part of my life. And watching Caroline get betrayed by the two people she trusted most was eating me alive. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. I started documenting the evidence. I took photos of the hotel key card before Mr. Richard discarded it. I kept the lingerie receipt. I wrote down the dates and times of his supposed late-night work nights, cross-referencing them with what I'd witnessed. I started paying closer attention to phone calls, noting when he would step away to take private conversations. Most importantly, I started keeping a detailed journal of Jennifer Patterson's visits to the house and how they coincided with Richard's behavior changes. For 2 weeks, I gathered evidence. The pattern became crystal clear. Every Tuesday and Thursday, Richard would announce he'd be working late. Every Tuesday and Thursday, Jennifer would happen to call Caroline around 8 p.m., claiming she was just checking in because she was bored at home. And every Tuesday and Thursday, Richard would return home just after midnight, smelling like that floral perfume and looking satisfied. But the most damaging evidence came by accident. I was cleaning the master bedroom when I found Caroline's phone charging on her nightstand. It buzzed with a text message, and the preview showed it was from Jennifer. Normally, I would never read someone's private messages, but the first few words made me freeze. Can't wait for Richard to leave tonight so we can... The preview cut off there, but I'd seen enough. Jennifer was texting Caroline about plans that involved Richard being away. She was literally coordinating their affair schedule through Caroline's own phone. I stared at that phone for 10 minutes, my hands shaking with rage. The audacity of these two people was beyond comprehension. They weren't just having an affair behind Caroline's back, they were using her as an unwitting accomplice in their deception. That night, I made a decision that terrified me, but felt absolutely necessary. I was going to tell Caroline everything. But I needed to do it right. I needed to have proof she couldn't deny, and I needed to choose the right moment when she'd be able to process the information without falling apart completely. The opportunity came the following week. Mr. Richard announced another late-night work night, this time claiming he had to entertain clients from out of town. Mrs. Caroline mentioned that Jennifer had suggested they have a girls' night since Richard would be busy, but Caroline was feeling tired and had declined. Jennifer has been so supportive lately, always calling to check on me when Richard's working these long hours, Caroline told me as I prepared dinner. I think I'll just have a quiet evening and go to bed early. Perfect. Caroline would be alone, calm, and able to focus on what I needed to tell her. After dinner, when the children had gone upstairs to do homework, I approached Mrs. Caroline in the living room. She was reading a book, looking peaceful in her favorite armchair. Mrs. Caroline, I need to talk to you about something very important. She looked up, immediately sensing the seriousness in my tone. What is it, Maria? Is everything all right? I sat down on the edge of the couch, my hands folded in my lap. It's about Mr. Richard and Mrs. Patterson. Her eyebrows furrowed. Jennifer? What about them? This was it, the moment that would either destroy her world or set her free from a life built on lies. Mrs. Caroline, Mr. Richard has not been working late like he tells you. For the past 3 months, I've been noticing things that didn't make sense. And last week, I followed him. Her face went pale. What do you mean you followed him? I pulled out the folder I've been keeping hidden in my car. Inside were photos, receipts, dates, and detailed notes about everything I'd witnessed. He's been going to Mrs. Patterson's apartment. They're having an affair. The book slipped from her hands and fell to the floor with a soft thud. She stared at me like I'd just spoken in a foreign language. That's impossible. Jennifer is my best friend. Richard would never. They would never. I opened the folder and spread the evidence across the coffee table between us. The hotel key card, the lingerie receipt, photos I'd taken of his car at Jennifer's apartment complex, screenshots of text message previews I'd seen on her phone. Mrs. Caroline, I'm so sorry to be the one to tell you this, but you deserve to know the truth. She picked up the hotel keycard with shaking fingers, staring at it like it was a foreign object. The Grandview Resort. This is where Richard took me for our 15th anniversary. That detail hit harder than everything else. He was taking his mistress to places that held special memories with his wife.
Caroline was quiet for a long time, studying each piece of evidence. I watched her face cycle through denial, confusion, anger, and finally a cold kind of clarity. "How long have you known?" she asked, without turning around. "I suspected something for months, but I had proof 2 weeks ago. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you." "And you're certain it's Jennifer?" "I saw them together, Mrs. Caroline. There's no mistake." She stood up suddenly and walked to the window, staring out at the driveway where Richard's BMW wasn't parked because he was at his lover's apartment. "You know what the worst part is, Maria?" she said without turning around. "Yesterday, Jennifer called me crying because she said she was lonely and wished she could find a man like Richard. She said I was so lucky to have a faithful husband who worked hard for his family." The cruelty of that conversation, knowing what I now knew, was breathtaking. Caroline turned back to face me, and I saw something in her expression that I'd never seen before. It wasn't just hurt or anger, it was determination. "I want you to help me catch them in the act." "Mrs. Caroline, I don't think—" "No, Maria, you've given me the truth, and I'm grateful, but now I want them to face the consequences. Both of them." Over the next hour, Caroline and I developed a plan. The following Tuesday, when Richard inevitably announced another late-night work night, Caroline would tell him she was going to visit her sister in the next town and wouldn't be home until Thursday. She'd ask Jennifer to check on the house and make sure everything was secure. What Richard and Jennifer wouldn't know was that Caroline would be hiding in the house, waiting to confront them when they inevitably decided to use her absence as an opportunity to be together in her own home. "They think I'm stupid," Caroline said, as we finalized the details. "They think I'm just the naive wife who believes everything her husband tells her. Well, they're about to find out exactly how smart I really am." Tuesday arrived, and everything went according to plan. Richard announced his late-night work night. Caroline told him about her trip to visit her sister, and she made a point of calling Jennifer in front of Richard, asking her to keep an eye on the house. "Of course, sweetie," Jennifer had said over speakerphone. "I'll drive by tomorrow evening to make sure everything looks good." Richard's eyes lit up when he heard that. He probably thought he'd hit the jackpot. An empty house, and a built-in excuse for Jennifer to be there. Caroline pretended to leave for her sister's house at noon. Instead, she parked her car at my house, and I drove her back to the estate through the back entrance that the landscaping crews used. We positioned her in the guest bedroom upstairs, where she'd have a clear view of the driveway and could hear anyone entering the house. At 8 p.m., we watched through the bedroom window as Richard's BMW pulled into the driveway, followed immediately by Jennifer's white Mercedes. "I can't believe they're actually doing this," Caroline whispered, but her voice was steady. We watched as they—
"I want both of you out of my house," Caroline continued, her voice getting stronger with each word. "Richard, you can collect your things tomorrow when I'm not here. Jennifer, if I ever see you again, I'll make sure every woman in our social circle knows exactly what kind of friend you really are." She turned and walked out of the dining room, leaving them sitting there with their romantic dinner and their shattered secret. That was 6 months ago. Caroline filed for divorce the next week and got an excellent settlement thanks to the evidence I'd helped her gather. Richard moved into a downtown apartment, and his relationship with Jennifer fell apart within 2 months. Apparently, affairs are much less exciting when they're not forbidden anymore. Caroline kept me on as her housekeeper, gave me a significant raise, and tells people I'm not just her employee, but the person who saved her from wasting any more years of her life on people who didn't deserve her. As for me, I learned that sometimes being invisible gives you the power to see everything that matters. And sometimes the most important thing you can do for someone is show them the truth, even when it's painful. If you've ever discovered a secret that could change someone's life, drop a comment below and share your story. Where are you watching from? How did you handle the situation? Your experiences matter, and I read every single comment. Hit that subscribe button if you want more stories about finding the courage to speak up when you witness injustice. Sometimes the people with the least power in a situation are the ones with the most important information to share.